Good evening, everybody. So what would you do if you had no fear? A simple question, but if you really think about it, what would you do? Would you take off in a plane and travel somewhere that you've always wanted to go? Most of us don't do that. We always think about where will we end up, you need to book somewhere to stay, and what will you do once you get there. There's a lot of planning involved. Would you jump from an airplane like some of us in our club have done? Would you quit your job, maybe find something more challenging? Would you buy a bigger home, your dream home that you've always wanted since you were young, but you just think about it and you renovate your own home, but you actually go out and get your home? There's fears involved, fear of spending too much money maybe. And for some people who may be divorced or have fallen out of love, would you fall in love again? That's another risk a lot of people take later in their lives. So this is a book that was given to me about 5 years ago, titled, What Would You Do If You Had No Fear? That's where I got my speech title. But it was given to me by a really good friend, and I don't think it was because they thought that I was maybe wussy or actually really afraid to do anything, but they knew that there were some things that fear was holding me back from doing in my life. So at the time, I poked through a couple of the small chapters, and I pretty much kept it in my nightstand. I haven't really read it over the past couple of years. But recently, I've decided that I would read it since I'm not working right now. I decided to take up reading. And I found that the book is really, really interesting, and I thought with a speech coming up, this would be a great speech topic. So, Diane Conway, the author of the book, this is actually her on the front cover, jumping from an airplane. Her biggest fear when asked, what would you do if you had no fear, was to actually write this book. She's actually somebody just like you and I, someone who was afraid of taking chances and changing things in her life. She fell in love for the second time later in life, which was a big hurdle for her. And she went around and asked strangers, what would you do if you had no fear? And the book is actually made up of small little stories from the answers that she got from people. And she would give advice and give them nudges in the right direction, saying like what they should do. So by the end of the book, you have a good idea of some different situations, and I would really recommend it to anybody who thinks that there is something holding them back, because she does give you there's a lot of different types of examples, something we can all relate to. So in the book, there's a quote there from a friend of Diane, and the friend said, "Fear is the very thing that can actually move us away from fear, but only once we acknowledge that we actually have it." So this means that fear, by overcoming the fear, is the only way that we can get away from the fear that we have. And I wanted to apply this to Toastmasters because I think most of us at least started off coming here because we had a fear of public speaking. And a lot of people stay, I guess, because they enjoy it after so many years. So the only way that we could acknowledge it was by coming. I personally have the fear of public speaking, so to acknowledge it, I decided to join Toastmasters. So now I'm going to ask each of you to answer the question to yourselves, what would you do if you had no fear? You can write it down if you like, or just think it in your head for a minute. It's a deep question, something that if you really think about it, some different ideas will come to your mind than what you might think really quickly. Okay, so as I said, my fear was public speaking. In job interviews, when they say, what are your worst qualities or something you'd like to improve in yourself, I always said public speaking. But until now, I never had one of those backups. Like Sarah said in her table topics last week, it's nice to have something to back you up, so if there's a way to make it sound like you're trying to improve what you're doing. Now I tell them, but I'm a Toastmaster trying to improve my public speaking skills. But it wasn't so easy just joining Toastmasters. I started off as a guest January of last year at the same time. And for 5 months I was a guest. And on my first meeting, I wouldn't do the table topic. I was frightened to death. And after 5 months, I decided I would join, after coming to every single meeting. And I started to take on small roles. And then later got to some bigger roles that took a bit more time. And then finally I decided to start some speeches, which were the biggest hurdle for me. And here I am on number 6. Diane Conway, the author of the book, she said at one point in the book there that she wanted to climb a mountain. She said Mount Everest. That's probably one of the, well, it is the highest mountain. And she gives an example of something that goes through a lot of people's heads. And when you tell yourself, I want to climb a mountain, this is an example of something that might go through your head. So the scary speech I deliver in my mind goes like this. So you want to climb a mountain? Ha! Sister, let me give you a reality check. You don't have a clue how to go about it. You can't even go a morning without a latte. You have a tendency to whine, and that's a turnoff for other climbers. Girl, you better forget it and just stay home. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Something similar to that? We find ourselves talking ourselves out of something that we really want to do, whether it be going on a trip, like I mentioned. You know, it's maybe there's a concert down in the States, and you'd like to go, but the thought of booking a flight and who to go with and where you're going to stay, these are all hurdles that we have to overcome, so it's easier just to stay home for most of us. So the trick is baby steps. So this is how I'm going to tell you how you can overcome some of your fears through baby steps. So the first thing that you should do is, as I mentioned a minute ago, write down your goal or your dream on paper and make it concrete. Maybe write it down, put it up on your fridge, in your locker, or on your mirror. And then break it down into doable increments. So these are steps that you can actually see doing within like a couple of months as opposed to years from now. So for example, to climb a mountain, maybe first of all you would check with some adventure companies and see what they have to offer. And then start doing weekend hikes, maybe with groups. Around here we have the East Coast Trail. They do hikes all the time as groups. And then maybe register for some climbing classes if you're interested in the climbing aspect of it. So you can apply that to almost anything. If you want to take a trip, maybe go on a smaller trip, or look into a travel agency and see what they have, as opposed to just trying to do it all on your own. So I have a quote also from the book here, and it's from Dorothy Parker. It says, "Only when we are no longer afraid do we begin to live." I think these words are very, very true. You can only live your life by overcoming your fears. Your fears will always hold you back. So it's something that you should all consider, is to look at your fears and start doing them. Start overcoming them by taking those baby steps. So in conclusion, I'd like to say enjoy the process of overcoming your fears. It's like Christmas. Half the pleasure is in the planning.